Business is simple. It's just not easy. We focus on three things to help you run and grow your business more easily: talent, sales, and how to scale. This is the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. And I'm swooning over here over the fact that we have April Dunford on the line with us today. Just wrote Obviously Awesome. She is founder of Ambient Strategy. I fell in love with the book. I was so excited. I reached out and said, hey, thanks for this. And you wouldn't want to come on my podcast, would you? And she was crazy enough to agree. So all of that to say, welcome, April.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm happy to be here.
I'm super pleased that you are here. So if you haven't read it yet, check it out. Obviously Awesome. It's a real how-to guide on positioning. And that might not be the most exciting thought in your mind of, positioning.
Oh, come on. It's super exciting.
Right? So I'd rather do messaging or as well. Right? And whenever I read this, I was like, holy cow, I didn't realize all of this went into this. So one of the first questions that we always ask, April, is, yeah, you wrote the book. So what? Why should we listen to you? So why should we listen to you on this?
Maybe you shouldn't. We should just leave it at that. No, here's why I think you should listen to me. You know what? I think this is a really good question. So my background is I spent 25 years as a repeat vice president of marketing at a series of successful startups. I think I did 7.
Wow.
6 of those startups got acquired. And so through acquisition, I worked at a bunch of bigger companies where I ran marketing teams and product teams. And across all 7 of those, I repositioned and launched 16 products into market. So that's my background of doing positioning as a practicing vice president of marketing. And then since leaving that and going to be a consultant, I've worked with about 150 different startups on their positioning. So I've done an awful lot of positioning. The common theme across all of that is I've always worked in tech. So the vast majority of those companies are tech companies, and almost all of them are B2B. I don't really do consumer stuff. So, if you want to position toothpaste or something, I may not be your gal. But if you've got a B2B tech product, I feel pretty good that I know what I'm doing in that little box.
So you've been there a time or two.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, and I'm reluctant to say this or ask this question of you because you likely get it a bazillion times. You wrote about it right in your book that people are always asking me about it. So sorry for asking you this first one, but positioning versus messaging, because talk to us a little bit about the difference between why positioning even over messaging.
Yeah. So it is very much positioning and messaging get confused all the time. In fact, the other one that it gets confused with is branding. So people will say, oh, I know what positioning is. It's brand positioning. And I'm like, there's branding, there's positioning. And those two things are actually completely separate concepts, in my opinion. Same thing with messaging. So if you tell me, April, I've got this amazing tech product, please go and create me some messaging. I go, okay, well, first I got a bunch of questions for you. Who's the product for? And what is the value of this product? And you have competitors. How do you beat those competitors? And what exactly is the market that you intend to win with this product? I can't do messaging until I answer those questions. Positioning is how we get to the answer for all of those questions. So there's all this stuff that we do in marketing and sales, but positioning is the foundation of that. It is the input to almost everything we do downstream, but positioning has to come first.
Well, especially startups, especially these really smart founders, I can sell this to anyone. This is really good. There is no competition. We hear all of this craziness all the time, right? So how do you deal with that? How do you get them to unpack this? Because they want to, I've seen that they typically want to skip that and go right to the sales or right to the marketing and right to exit. But there's a lot of work that goes in front of that. So how do you deal with that founder that's like, don't worry about it?
Yeah. So the first thing to think about, and when we're building stuff and we work inside startups and we get really into our own stuff, and sometimes it's hard to kind of step back and say, all right, let's think about this from a customer's perspective. So I've got a product, I'm trying to sell it to somebody. I'm the customer, I'm trying to buy something. Right? I'm on a purchase journey. Now, this thing that I'm trying to buy solves a problem. And you know what? I have the problem today. And I'm solving the problem today, doing something. And it might be something stupid. Maybe I'm doing it with an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe I've hired an intern to do it, or maybe I have a bunch of manual process. Maybe I'm using my ERP system, which was never designed to solve that problem, but I've been getting by with that. It's okay. And then I wake up one morning and you know what? Joey, the intern, made a big mistake and everything's terrible. And I'm like, you know what? I got to stop doing it like this. I got to go look for something else. And so then what I do? I go on the internet, I Google it up. I'm like, I need to find software that does this. And somehow I assemble a short list if it's B2B, right?
Right.
I've got 2-3 things that I'm looking at. And one of those things is yours. So who do I got to beat? Well, first I got to beat the status quo. I got to beat Joey, the intern. I got to beat Excel spreadsheet, because if I don't, then the customer will just stay doing what they do. And we know that we lose on average 30%, 40% of our deals to do nothing. So if we don't consider that a competitor, we're not doing it right. So that's the first thing. We got to beat that. And then even if I beat that and convince the customer that they've got to do something, I'm not the only game in town. They've got other things on their list. Now, you might not think those things are direct competition to you, but if a customer puts it on a list, you got to beat them too.
Well, and that's a curious statement, because especially since we're so deep in the weeds, we can't see the forest for the trees, as they say, right? That old cliche.
Yeah.
How do you get that founder to realize that? Because they truly believe that they have the better mousetrap and there is no competition.
Well, and they probably, and many times they do, right? They do have a better mousetrap for a certain kind of customer, not
Right.
for everybody. And so generally, the way we start a positioning exercise is, again, this idea of not who is my competitor. It's who's my competitive alternative. So there's lots of ways to solve a problem. And you can solve a problem with lots of things that don't compete with you.
Right.
But in the minds of customers, it's an alternative way of solving the problem. So, I can do my invoices by just, doing that with a Word document or Excel spreadsheet. So there's that. The other thing is that, there's other things out there that are clearly not as good as your product. I give you that, right? For certain kinds of customers. But it doesn't mean that a customer knows that yet when they go to talk to you. And so your job in a sales situation is to help a customer make sense of, look, there's different approaches to solving this problem. Hey, here's what they are, and here's the negatives of each of those. And if you look at that, there's a gap. And we are the only people that can fill that gap. That's why you want to buy our stuff. If you can't tell that story, then I don't think you're really thinking about this from a customer's perspective, and you're likely to lose deals.
So 2 things off of that. One is, it is critically important to look at this from a buyer's journey perspective. If you cannot put yourself in the shoes of your buyer, you're messing up already. And then 2, one thing that you also said is, hey, be transparent about this. Bring up the alternatives in front of them and hash it out right there. I mean, I hear some people going, that's crazy, April. Why in the world would I do that?
Well, I'm a big fan of that. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to name your competitors, because you don't always have to. But generally, here's the thing to think about. In B2B, in tech, if we're selling to a business buyer, I'm trying to sell technology to a business buyer, the vast majority of the time, in fact, something like 93% of the time, we are selling to a person that has never purchased a solution like that before.
Interesting.
So think about that. You've never, so your boss woke up and went to you and said, dude, find me some CRM. We got to buy some CRM here. And you're going, frick, I never purchased CRM before. I don't, what's a good CRM? What's a bad CRM? I don't know nothing about CRM. And so what do? I get on the Google, right? And so, and I look, and where do I end up? I end up on G2 Crowd or Software Advice, or, maybe I pull some Gartner reports, God knows. And there's 1,000 CRMs. There's 1,000 CRMs out there.
Right.
And I don't know which one of them is good. I don't know how to make purchase criteria. I have no idea. And so somehow I end up making some kind of a short list. I'm talking to vendors. And what I actually want, and the research bears this out, if the research shows that what customers want, especially early on in a purchase cycle from their salespeople, is they want a salesperson to help them make sense of the market. That is very different from saying they want you to make sense of your product. I want to make sense of the approaches. There's 1,000 CRMs. Why should you even be on my list? Am I paying attention to the right things? And so one of the things that we can do that is essentially super helpful to buyers is to say, look, there are different ways to do this. There are different approaches to this problem. And let's talk about it. There's approach A, and the pluses and minuses are like this. There's approach B, pluses and minuses like this. Approach C, and I don't have to necessarily name a company. I could name a list of companies if I wanted to and say, but look, approach 1 is do it manually. Approach 2 is use a mid-market solution. Here's some examples of those. Approach 3 is use a vertical industry solution. Here's some examples of those. And then I talk about the pluses and minuses. But the important part is if in that exploration, I should be able to say, look, here's how the market maps out, man. And look, there's a gap. For customers like you, there's a great big hole. None of those things satisfy this set of requirements that customers like you have. And that's us. We plug that hole right there. So if you can do that, then what you've done is not only successfully positioned your own solution, you positioned everybody else as well. Like what you're doing is you're giving the customer a way to think about the whole market so they can feel confident that 1, they're taking the right approach. And then once they've selected that approach, 2, you're a very good option to do it that way.
So interesting. So this points out that spot, that opening, that gap, that should be where you niche out. That's where you attack the market, because they always say there's riches in the niches. So
people say niches, but I mean, that could be billions and billions of revenue in there.
Right.
Right? Like that could be billions of revenue in there. Like if we stay on the topic of CRM, for example, right? Like not everybody out there wants a CRM that does absolutely everything, but it comes with a really hefty price tag.
Right.
And that's Salesforce. And they do billions of revenue. If you want everything and you got the money to do it, you want number 1, we're number 1.
Right.
But there is a lot of market around them of companies that would never choose Salesforce because it's simply overkill, too complex, too expensive. And there's a lot of other different reasons why you wouldn't do it. Doesn't have anything special for particular industries. So there's lots of niches around that are also very big. Mm-hmm. So what you do have to do is define where is the space that you win. And that can be very, very big, that space. For a lot of startups, what you really want to do is define, here's the space where I win right now. It's not necessarily the space where you're going to win next year or 10 years from now. But if I'm trying to sell stuff right now, I got to be able to define the pocket right now that says, here's where I win.
Right. Now, how do we, so this is going to be a really tactical question. How do we find the space where we win? Is this your 5+1? Is it that exercise or something different?
Yeah, so it kind of works like that. So again, if I say, look, I got a product and it's in the market right now. So first I can look at it and I can say, all right, who do I compete with? Well, I compete with the status quo. It looks like this. I compete with the other things that end up on the short list. This is who I got to beat. And then you say, okay, what have I got that the alternatives don't have? Feature function, capability wise, what have I got? I can fill a whiteboard full of this. Generally, when I'm working with clients, we fill a whiteboard full of these things. Then what I can do is I can take those features and I can map those features to value. So I got all these differentiated features that only I have, my alternatives don't have it. So what for customers? What does the customer get out of that? And that gets me to differentiated value. Then I can take a step back and say, all right, I got a thing and I'm selling it to small businesses, and almost any small business wants this, but you know what? If these are my 3 points of differentiated value, not everybody cares about that.
Right.
But some folks care a lot. And if you could answer the question, what are the characteristics of a company that makes them care a lot about my differentiated value? That's who your best fit customers are. That's the spot where you win.
Okay, so some people would say, well, I would find that out in a messaging exercise, but really what you're suggesting, that's all part of, that's the positioning exercise that you get that.
It's not just messaging, right? Now I've got to be able to express that to people. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, I don't get to just make this up. Like, hopes and dreams don't get me to the place where I win, right? So
Right.
I got to actually look at, where is my product uniquely qualified to meet the needs of a set group of customers? And the only way I can look at that is I say, well, here are the other alternatives. Here's the stuff I've got that they don't have. And here's the value I provide. That it doesn't come from anywhere else. We don't make this up.
Right. Right.
That's where it comes from. And then we say, okay, well, if this is what I can uniquely provide, who cares about that? Who cares a lot about that? And these are the people where if I can figure that out, then these are the accounts where I should win every single time, because only I can do this stuff.
Now, how do you figure that out, especially on a new product launch? Do we do lean startup, the customer interviews? Is it minimal viable product? We test it out and then get feedback from there. I mean, walk us through. Is it that easy? Or not? I don't want to say that easy, but is that straightforward?
Well, so here's the thing: if it's a brand new product, and I'm trying to do this for a product that I haven't even got a product yet. I'm going to launch it. It's not out in the market yet. What I actually have at that phase is a positioning thesis, right? I don't know if it's true or not. I just got a thesis. So if I'm doing lean startup, for example, I go out and I'm doing my interviews with potential prospects. And based on all those customer discovery interviews, I come back and I say, okay, here's my positioning thesis. My thesis is, here's who I compete with. Here's how I'm different. This is the value I can provide that no one else can provide. Therefore, these are the kind of customers that are going to love me. This is the market I'm going to win. That's my thesis. Now, here's what happens, right? I throw it out in the market, whether it's minimum viable product or whatever, I put something out in the market and I get feedback on it. And generally what I'm trying to do, again, if I'm following lean startup, I'm trying to validate all the assumptions that went into my thesis.
Mm-hmm.
Do I actually see these competitors in accounts? Is that really who I compete with? Or is there something else in there I didn't think of? Are my differentiated things actually differentiated? Or are there other things in there that I wasn't even thinking about? Does my value resonate with these kind of customers the way I assumed that it would? Or is there some other kind of customer I didn't even consider has found my stuff and loves my stuff and is pulling me in a completely different direction? So in the early phases, when you've just launched a new thing, what you're trying to do is validate your positioning thesis. And generally, in my experience, having been a gal that's launched a lot of products, we're wrong. We're wrong on all kinds of stuff. Because customers do shit we would never predict in a million. And so what happens is after we've gotten our first wave of customers, then what we've got is we're starting to see the patterns in who loves our stuff and why. And that's a very good, that is a very good point to then revisit the positioning and tighten it up, because your thesis was probably wrong.
Got it. Okay.
So a lot of folks come to me and their product hasn't launched yet. And they're like, oh, April, we want to hire you to come and tighten up our positioning. And I'm like, look, you got a thesis. It's as good as you can make it with customer discovery, but trust me, it's going to change. So you actually want to leave the positioning a little bit loose, because you don't know where it's going to get pulled. And so the example that this is a terrible analogy, but it's the only one I got. So I use it all the time. It's like you designed a fishing net and you think it's for tuna. It's a tuna fishing net. And so I could launch the thing and say world's greatest tuna fishing net, and we go fishing with it for tuna, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but that's my thesis. Or I could launch it with kind of loose positioning and say, you know what, that's my thesis, but I'm not really sure how this is going to work out. So I'm going to launch it as a net. It's a fishing net for big fish, all kinds of big fish. And then, throw that sucker out in the ocean, and then let's see what we pull up.
Right.
And maybe what we get is a whole bunch of grouper, and then we say, you know what? It's not a tuna fishing net, it's a grouper fishing net. Who knew? And then I can tighten up my positioning around that and just go sell the hell out of the grouper fishermen.
Now, okay, so we were talking about, well, a couple of things, but whenever we're looking at, like, we use CRM, so that's a software. One might call it super commoditized. Can we take some super commoditized?
Not, but okay.
So there's thousands of them out there, right? So
I worked for a company. I ran marketing for a division of a company that was the CRM before Salesforce existed, and my division did 800 million revenue.
Right.
The whole company did 2 billion revenue. They don't even exist today.
Got it.
At the time, we thought we were untouchable too. At the time, we thought we were totally commodity too. Turned out we weren't.
Okay, so which brings up that point, right? So whenever we have a ton of competition, then it really gets to a positioning statement or positioning of how do we differentiate ourselves. Is that right? Because I liked your example, and I can't remember it right off the top of my head.
Markets are crowded, right? There's every market is crowded.
And it's noisier and noisier. There's so much out there. It's so hard to stand out. And one thing that I liked about yours is it a muffin? Is it a cake? Is it a, what did you call it? What was that?
A paleo snack.
That's it, a paleo snack. So, is that really what we have to do? Is what, even if it's super, and I won't say commodity again, but even if it's commoditized, even there's a ton of competition out there, it's really getting that, hey, it's really a paleo snack kind of thing?
Well, here's the thing, like if you're in the market and you're selling some stuff, people are picking you for a reason.
Right.
There are underserved parts of existing markets all over the place, right? Like, you know, and I just illustrated it with Salesforce. Like, what 3-person sales team picks Salesforce?
The ones that don't know any alternatives.
Right. So there's an awful lot of market to go around, and an awful lot of places that even where you have a super dominant leader in the market, there are an awful lot of unserved segments all around that. And that's not even talking about emerging markets, right? So, you know, we have new categories of software emerging all the time where there isn't a dominant player yet. And that's just kind of a dogfight. There's all kinds of people in there trying to redefine where the boundaries are and trying to redefine what's where. So just because our market is crowded doesn't mean there isn't a lot of opportunity that we can uniquely go after and uniquely win.
Yeah, and
the other thing to think about is, and I talk about this a lot with the companies that I work for, is, look, your positioning is going to change as the company grows and evolves. And so, you know, if I think about it in a very practical way, right? If all you got to do this year is 20 deals, then what you should really be thinking about is, what is the easiest way for me to do 20 deals? Not what is the biggest market I could go after. And, you know, this isn't about raising venture capital. That's where you tell those stories. If I'm just trying to like do 20 deals, then why wouldn't I define this tightly defined, here's a spot where we never lose. Here's a spot where we win every deal, and just run right at that, get to 20 deals. And then after I've got the 20 deals, then I can say, well, I don't know, can I get another 20 in that little patch, or do I have to widen things out a little bit? Then I'm worried about how I'm going to widen it out.
Well, let's play advocate against that, right? Well, yeah. I don't want to do that because then I'll saturate the market. I have to win the whole entire thing. That seems too risky.
Who doesn't want to win a market?
Well, there's only 20 though. So we'll keep role playing this. There's only 20 though.
What do you mean there's only 20?
Well,
I can't win all 20.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, I won't win all 20. That's how it works. Like, the market has to be big enough to meet your revenue goal. So if your revenue goal is, I got to do 20 deals, well, then there might, you know, I hope there's 1,000 prospects in that market. Otherwise, I don't know how you're going to do 20 deals.
Right. Yeah, right.
So you do have to do that math a little bit, right? That, you know, we all got funnels and conversion rates and funnels, and not everybody's ready to buy today. So, you know, there should be a few thousand in that market, you know, at least. But chances are you're going to define the market in a way, and you're going to look at that and you're going to go, gosh, there's 20,000 companies in there, and all I got to do is 20 deals. I can do this.
Yeah.
But then
And
when
then,
you get to the end of it, you want to say, is that big enough? I'll give you an example. So I worked for a company and we were enterprise CRM. This is why I know so much about CRM. Enterprise CRM. And this was when Salesforce only sold to little bitty little companies. Everybody forgets this. Remember when they had the free 3-seat version when they first launched, right? Your first
yes.
3 seats were free, and then you had to pay for additional seats after that because they were going after micro SMB. That's who used Salesforce. I was working at a company that was selling enterprise CRM, and our big competitor at the time was Siebel, 2 billion revenue, 8,000 employees, giant, publicly traded, fastest company to 1 billion revenue ever in the history of Silicon Valley, blah, blah, blah. So we're positioned exactly against them. They're enterprise CRM, we're enterprise CRM, and we can't sell nothing. Because every time we go in, we're this little tiny company in Canada. We don't have any real differentiators. In fact, their product's way better than ours. Ours has only been around for a year or so. But we get this little feature that differentiates us, and they can't copy it because it's right in our data model. And so we could model relationships in a slightly different way than they did. Problem is we didn't know who cared about that. So we showed it in deals, and every time we showed it, people are like, hey, that looks kind of cool. What do you use it for? And we're like, anything you want. No, right? So, but eventually what happened was we sold a deal to an investment bank. And it turns out our way of modeling relationships was like crack for investment bankers. Like investment bankers went crazy for this thing. They're like, oh my gosh, I got to have that. And so we ended up repositioning ourselves as CRM for investment banks. Now, does that sound really niche-y?
It does.
Yeah, it does, right? So we had to go and sell that to the board. So we got a board, we got a bunch of people who have invested in us, and they're like, no way, man, that market's way too small. How many investment banks are there on the planet?
Yeah.
Right. And we're at the time we were doing 2 million revenue. So the way we sold them is we said, look, we're going to be able to raise our prices because we're specialized. And secondly, we're not going to do investment banking forever. We're going to be CRM for investment banks. And once we think we're dominating investment banking, that's going to give us a way to get to retail banking, because a lot of these investment banks have a retail bank.
Right.
So then we're going to go to the retail bank. Then we're going to be CRM for banking. And then once we've got retail banking, that gives us a way to get into insurance, because a lot of the retail banks do insurance too.
Yep.
That's going to give us a way. And then we're going to be CRM for financial services. And let me tell you, that is a massive market. And then once we get there, then we're going to take on Siebel head to head. Then we're going to, we're going to blow them out. And then we'll go back to be an enterprise CRM because we're going to dominate the world. Yeah. So do you know what happened in that? We just in the investment banking piece, we never actually made it out of investment banking. We went from 2 million to 80 million revenue in a little over a year.
Wow.
And everyone's like, ooh, that's too small. Ooh, that's too niche-y. And it just wasn't. And that company ended up getting acquired for $1.3 billion. And everyone's like, oh, you don't want to make your market so small. It's like, it's actually the opposite. The tighter you can get it, the more like the reason we grew so fast is because Siebel couldn't touch us in that space because we had a killer feature they didn't have. Yeah. So every deal we got into, it was us versus Siebel, and we're like, easy fight. We can beat them here. Can't beat them anywhere else. Can't touch them anywhere else. Yeah. But in here, easy fight.
But it's really knowing who you are, knowing what you're good at, and being comfortable with that, and just really ramping it up. So you've really lived out a crossing the chasm, if you remember that old book.
That's right.
Land your beach.
We were such big fans of Crossing the Chasm when I was doing that startup. That is how we sold the board on it. We drew the bowling pin strategy. Like, he has that thing in Crossing the Chasm, bowling pin strategy. We literally drew the pins on the whiteboard and said, look, our lead pin's investment banking. And once we knock that over, we get retail banking. Once we knock that over, then we get insurance and blah, blah, blah. We drew the pins on the board from Jeffrey Moore.
I love it. Okay. Now, so you gave us that. Now, can you touch on a little bit about the 5+1 process? And by the way, grab the book. Obviously awesome. Yeah, for goodness sakes.
I have it on my shelf right here so that I can do this.
See that? Oh, see, I have to watch it on YouTube. She's doing that. Put her finger up. Now,
that's a visual gag that doesn't translate to the podcast.
So
podcasters.
You gotta see it on YouTube. Come on. So within that, she talks about the 5+1. So it's a great book, but then you also have a number of different resources. And I love the PDFs, that waterfall positioning or whatever that one is. So let's hit that 5+1, please, if you will. Can you walk us through what is the 5+1?
Well, so, in the book, I describe a process for doing positioning. The process for doing positioning has 10 steps. There are 5 component pieces of positioning, and we work our way through them. And there's a bonus one, which is the +1. But the 5 component pieces of positioning are essentially these. It is competitive alternatives, or what would your customers do if you didn't exist. Second one is unique features or capabilities. So what do you got that the competitors don't have? Third one is differentiated value. So you got these capabilities, so what for customers? So what is the value that you can uniquely provide to customers? The fourth piece is, well, who are those customers? It's not for everybody. So how do we define who's our best fit customer in there? And then the fifth one is market category. So are you email or are you chat? What is the market that you intend to win? The bonus piece is how we loop in a relevant trend, which you don't have to do at all, but if you can, sometimes it's very cool to do so. And so in the book, I describe a bit about that. So the book itself kind of outlines the process for, how do I assemble a team to actually do this positioning work? And then when we go to do the work, how do I move through those 5 pieces? And then what do I do when I've got the 5 pieces? What do I do to then go make that be real in my messaging or in my sales pitch and all the rest of it?
So I have my sense of which one for me is the most difficult. In all of the people that you've worked with, from the alternatives to the unique offerings to the differentiating values, how do we show that value, to defining best fit customer, to categorization, of those, which one would you say is the most difficult for people to do?
Hands down, it's the value piece.
Okay.
And people don't think that's going to be the hard one. And the second most difficult one is competitive alternatives. Hilariously, everyone thinks that's the easy step. Everyone gets it wrong.
That's really interesting, because I was one of those ones.
You would say it's market category, right? You'd be like, that's the hard one, right?
That's exactly it.
No.
So
everyone's obsessed with market category, but once you figure out what your differentiated value is, market category is not that hard. It's figuring out, it's because everyone wants to go directly to category without really deeply understanding their differentiated value. Value in itself is actually a really hard concept, even for marketers to understand. And most people, if you talk about the difference between features and benefits and value, that is actually really hard conceptually to understand, even for marketers. And I got a room full of people that includes sales, product, the CEO, the founder, whoever runs customer success. We're trying to say, well, these are our features. Why do they matter? Like, that translation between features to value is actually really hard. Like in the workshops I do, we will spend maybe 6-7 hours across the whole 5 pieces. Like before we start working on a sales narrative, we might spend 3 of those on value.
Now, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but value, isn't it that we identify what the problem is? What's that dollar and cents impact? And that's going to give us, if this problem is solved,
but which problem? Which problem?
Okay, so
you solve lots of problems. Which problem? This is where people get into a corner in this stuff, is they do things like that. They'll say, let's just start with the problem. Product solves lots of problems. How do you define which problem?
Oh, okay. So forgive me. So whenever I'm looking at a problem, I'm taking it, and tell me if I'm wrong here. So I love this. You're beating me up. This is exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm beating you up. No.
So,
but I hate starting with the problem thing. It's going to get you in trouble. I can frame the problem that my product solves in 1,000 ways.
So
how do you know the right one?
Do you frame it from the product or the problem that your product solves, or do you frame it from the position of what the problem is that your ideal customer has? Because
here's the thing. My ideal customer has a multitude of problems. Some of them I solve and some of them I don't.
All right. So here's
what I'm actually trying to get at is,
yes,
what is the problem that is very important to that customer that I uniquely can solve? Now, how do I figure out that? It is the inverse of my differentiated value. How do I get to differentiated value? Well, differentiated value, by definition, comes from my differentiated features. Well, where do my differentiated features come from? Well, I must be differentiating them from something. So
Right.
that's my competitive alternatives. That's why we start at competitive alternatives. I got to know, what would the customer do if my stuff, so forget about problems. What would the customer do if my stuff didn't exist? Here's what they would do. One of these products. What have I got that these things don't have? Just my differentiated things. Now, what is the value that those differentiating things provides? That's my differentiated value. All right. If that's my differentiated value, what's the problem that I can uniquely solve? It is the problem that is the inverse of this value.
It's literally that easy. You're killing me. So what you're really saying is, yeah,
it's a very different way of thinking about it. Because half the time I'll go in and I'll give you an example. I work with a company this week, right?
that the board's out of the way. So what you didn't see on
e-commerce, they're e-commerce for grocery stores. What's the problem they solve? Well, selling your groceries online, right? No way, man. You know what? If all you want to do is sell groceries online, Instacart.
Yeah.
That's what you buy, Instacart. They do that way better than these guys. These guys, you know what? So what's the value that these guys provide? The value is they allow you to stand up your own e-commerce site easily, quickly, reliably, and do it in a way that preserves your margins and the loyalty of your customers with you.
Interesting.
So what's the problem that they solve? The problem they solve is allowing you to bring your business into the digital age by selling online, but to do that by, one, preserving your margin, and two, not becoming overly dependent on a company that is likely to compete with you in the future. That's the problem they solve. Now, that's nothing like selling groceries online. No, if all you want to do is sell groceries online, you just do Instacart. But what's the problem with Instacart? Well, the problem with Instacart is, one, they're going to compete with you. And two, they're going to charge you big fees, and they're going to compete with you for brand co-op dollars. And it's actually very hard for a grocery store to sell with Instacart and make any profit at all.
Yeah. Well, so
this is why people get into trouble with this thing. If they just put up a website and say, sell your groceries online, they lose that battle. They lose it. Every time they'll lose it. They'll lose it to Instacart.
So, and again, it makes such logical sense. It seems too simple. I mean, really, it's being honest with yourself of what people are really doing in lieu of using you. And it's not just your competitors. And that's a real thing that I took from your book, is really getting deep down and being honest about those alternatives. And then from those alternatives, it's making a list. Well, instead of that alternative, here's why we're better. And then from that, here's why we're better, help me with how we take that to the differentiated value. Is it the cost savings, time savings? Is it that we're getting down to the root cause?
Well, so here's what we get to, right? So we say, okay, like, let's take my grocery store e-commerce people as an example, right? So what are the alternatives? The alternatives are, you just put it on Instacart and don't have your own .com or whatever, because you don't have an IT department, man. That sucks. Put it on Instacart. That's option one. Well, actually, option one is do nothing, right? Like, just sell in the grocery store. Don't do anything. Option two is go and do it on Instacart. Option three is, well, I'm going to have to build my own site to do this stuff. And there's 3 or 4 competitors in there, but those competitors kind of fall into 2 camps. One is, they're kind of these cookie cutter mid-market solutions. And, you can't do a lot of things. Like, you can't sell prepared food. You can't sell like all the really high margin things you want to sell in the grocery store. You can't configure them to do that. Or there is another enterprise e-commerce thing out there, but those guys are kind of, it's a risky proposition to work with them, because they outsource all of their support. They outsource the implementation. You can go with them, but it's kind of risky. If something goes wrong, you got 7 different vendors there, and you're going to have to figure out who you're going to blame.
Right.
So that's their competitive landscape, right? So then you say, well, what do they got that the alternatives don't have? Well, first of all, you get to keep all your customer data, not pay a bunch of fees. If I'm comparing it to Instacart, not pay a bunch of fees, and work with people who aren't trying to put me out of business.
Yeah.
That's one, right? Number two, if I look versus the little guys, Well, I can have this site look however I want, preserve my brand identity, sell all these really hard margin things, right? If I look versus the other one, I got a company that does their own professional services. They've done a dozen other great big grocery store chains, so they know what they're doing. You got a very high likelihood that the project is going to get deployed successfully. Those are the differentiator. All right, what's the value of that? Well, the value of that is, point one, I'm going to buy from a company that is invested in my success, right? So not trying to compete with me, not trying to steal my data, not trying to compete with me with co-op dollars, all this sort of stuff. Two, I got a system that's super flexible, unlike the little guys, right? Super flexible, fits into whatever I've got right now. I can get it deployed really fast and easy, but at the same time, do prepared food, do all these other things. And so big margin, preserve my profitability, preserve my customer loyalty. And then the last one is, is kind of it's almost more objection handling than value, but it's like my likelihood of doing a successful project with these folks is high because I am a brand or a technology stack that people trust. So I'm a trusted provider. I'm not the first grocery store to do this. I'm going to do it with a team that's going to be with me all the way through, and we're going to get this thing done successfully. That's the differentiated value. That's why people pick my guys versus anybody else, versus Instacart, versus any other e-commerce for grocery store thing.
Yeah, so I see what I was doing wrong. I was taking the negative. We de-risk. So I was taking that negative and trying to put business case in dollars and cents. But you're legitimately saying, here's why you would want to do it. Here's the upside. Here's the value. So
why you pick us.
Got it. So I don't know how I missed that one, but okay.
Yeah, so this is why you pick us. And then the next question is, well, I could sell to any grocery store. What grocery store cares a lot about this? Well, you kind of have to understand, and we can help educate you, but you kind of have to understand that Instacart's a risk to your business. You have to understand the economics of working with Instacart, that it's hard to be profitable. And so their best fit customer is someone that's already working with Instacart and realizes what the heck is going on.
Right.
So and doesn't necessarily want to fully divest from Instacart. They might still want to be on that marketplace, but they're worried about the long-term implications of that. And they're like, you know what? We can't just do Instacart. We actually need to stand up our own thing.
Yeah. So even if I'm brand new in an industry, by me doing this research, I force myself into this research. I'm going to get really knowledgeable, especially because I'm such a limited market. I can learn a ton about that market, be very insightful, have strategic conversations with these folks. Now I'm a trusted advisor. There you go. I'm that trusted advisor.
I come in and say, look, you want to sell stuff online, right? We get it. But you're a little bit worried. And you know what? In 2020, we were all having a panic. COVID was happening. And you wanted to get that business online and you went with Instacart. We get it, right? But now what we see in the market is people are getting worried about being too reliant on Instacart as their all-in-one digital solution.
Right.
So what should you do? You've got choices. You
got your freedom.
Right? And here's the problem with that. Instacart has a thing for grocery stores. It's called Powered by Instacart. It's bad. And does that actually solve your problem? No, you're just getting even further in bed with Instacart. So that's a problem. So what are you going to do? Well, you got to build your own thing. Okay, well, if you got to build your own thing, you got choices. You could go to the mid-market solution. Here's why you don't want to do them. Or you could go with the other thing, but you got to be a little bit careful there. And so that's how I end up telling the story is, look, there's a gap. What we don't have is a good choice for a grocery store that wants to get online, but wants to get online with something they're sure is going to be successful, with a trusted partner that can do all the specialized grocery store things they need. And that's my guy. There's just nobody else out there that does it. If you want that, then you got to come with me. That's the spot where we win.
Yeah. And the beauty is what you're doing here is, one, we're helping that person problem solve. So again, back to that trusted advisor. But two, I always say this, if it's a no, if it's an NO, I want a KNOW right away. So if they go, but that's not a big deal. All right, well, that's going to be less expensive. Why don't you do that? I think I
Yeah,
will.
if you don't think it's a big deal to put all your eggs in this basket, go nuts.
Yeah, good luck. Hey, doesn't sound like it can help
I'm going to
you.
see you in 6 months, but yeah.
Precisely. Yeah. So you end that, you have a good relationship. You say, you might want to consider that, but hey, we'll be here whenever
But
you
if
come
you
around.
don't, we'll be here, right?
Yeah.
And we can try to convince you a little bit and show you a bit of the evidence, but that's all I can do, right?
Correct.
Like, and they do, right? In their sales process, they'll show some of the evidence that, yeah, they're going down this path, but if you don't, you don't. And so really what we're trying to do in the sales narrative piece of this, like once we have the positioning, we can then say, okay, here's our definition of the problem. Here are the different approaches to the problem. But the way we look at it, our point of view on the market is that there is a gap here and we are designed to fill that gap.
Yeah. Well, it seems super easy. And you said you have roughly 176 times that you've done this.
Something like that.
All right. So after 176 times, we'll figure it out. Son of a gun.
150 something-ish. Yeah, a bunch of times.
All right. So I want to be cognizant of your time. I could talk to you all day. This has been a blast. I really appreciate it. So let's rapid fire these next couple of things. So looking at your clients or even some of the work that you've done, what has been some of the biggest challenges or mistakes that you've made that you're willing to share with us so we cannot have that same pain and same scars that you've earned?
Yeah, some of the biggest challenges. Again, I think there's this idea, one is in the early days of the product when you're just launching it, you don't want to get too tight on the positioning. There's only so much you can do in customer discovery calls. You actually want to keep it loose. Wait till you start seeing the patterns, tighten it up then. Second thing is that, good positioning generally does not happen by accident. Like at some point, you're going to have to take a step back and you need to get the whole team together and you need to get everybody in agreement and alignment on here's who we compete with. Here's how we're different. This is why we win. This is who we win with. If we're all agreement on alignment on that, we're going to do fine.
Yeah.
If we're not, it's going to be really, really hard to grow.
Yeah. So much there. I had so many notes here, April, that I wanted to hit that so much more deeply, but son of a gun. All right, time is our enemy here. So a best business hack, and I shared it with you before, and you got pretty passionate about this. So best business hack around whether talent management, hiring people, sales development, or scaling, and you jumped all over.
Well, this thing about scaling. So because essentially this is, back in the days when I was a vice president of marketing, that's why you hired me, right? I came in when you were a couple million revenue. You hired me to be the brand new vice president of marketing. And my job was to put the foot on the gas on lead generation so we could scale. And, the key to that, so this comes back to an idea of, product market fit. If you follow venture capitalists, they'll talk about, we'll achieve product market fit. We don't know how that is and we don't know how to define it. It's a nebulous thing, but you know it when you got it. We have product market fit and that's when we're going to scale. So they'd hire me and say, we have product market fit, April, let's scale. And I'd be like, okay, who's our competition and how are we different? And what's the value that we provide that no one else does? And exactly what is the definition of customers where we win? If we can't answer that, then I can't do good marketing programs. And if I can't do good marketing programs, we're not going to scale.
Yeah.
It's simple as that. So we have to absolutely nail that positioning. There is no way that you can scale really fast and not have that super tightly locked down. And often the minute we get that super tightly locked down, that's when we unlock the growth. It's like my example of the company where we thought we were CRM for everybody. It turned out we were CRM for investment banks. We had been sitting at $1 million revenue for 3-4 years. The minute we locked down that positioning and defined, here's the spot where we win every time, that's what gave us the ramp. That's what got us from 2 to 80 in a year.
Yeah. I love that. And I was not expecting you to say that. I was expecting you to say, well, if you don't have the systems and the processes and the way to protect brand.
All that stuff too.
Yeah. So I love that. So good. Yeah, that too. All right. Yeah, so too. Other than obviously awesome, buy the book already. What other books, podcasts, resources that you might suggest that we check out so we can be as smart as you?
Well, you know what? It's funny. A lot of the books that I've read that I have a bunch of older books that I keep coming back to because I think they're so good. And that I think everyone should read, and I'm kind of surprised that people don't, and they probably don't because they're kind of old now, but they're still really good. Like earlier, you and I were talking about Jeffrey Moore's, Crossing the Chasm and Bowling Pin Strategies. Like, it's amazing how much I come back to that book.
Yeah.
The one that I come back to a lot when we're talking about sales narrative and how you construct a good sales story is The Challenger Sale.
Okay.
And the companion book to that, The Challenger Customer, I come back to that one a lot when I'm talking to companies about personas and what do we do when we've got a complex deal and there's multiple stakeholders in the deal, and how do we figure out how to have our positioning work across those multiple ones. Those two books, Challenger Sale and Challenger Customer, like anybody selling the B2B should read those, and they're hefty books.
Yeah.
They're based on a really solid foundation of empirical research. And I come back to those two books probably more than anything else on my bookshelf.
Okay. That's awesome stuff.
Except for maybe the original positioning book, which I actually have sitting on my desk at all times, called Positioning: The Battle for Your Mind by these guys, Rees and Trout. And they invented the concept of positioning. This is still a great book. It was written in the 80s, if you can believe that. I still recommend people read it. It's really good. What it doesn't do is tell you how to do it. That's the gap that my book's trying to fill.
And I love the fact that yours just really lays it out there. So, hey, future trends that we should worry about. What are you watching and anticipating?
Well, so here's what I think. We've spent the last 10 years really obsessed with tactics. Like on the marketing side in particular, we've been all about growth hacking and tactical shit. And what I am seeing right now is the pendulum swinging back to strategy and fundamentals. Like, how do we make sure we've got really solid underpinning before we get jumping to tactics? So I'm kind of excited about that because I sit on that side of the fence.
Yeah.
And I think this is actually very, very good for marketing in general.
Good. All right. So we're at time, son of a gun. So April, who should reach out to you? How should they do it? And why in the world should they reach out to you?
Well, I don't know why you want to reach out to me, but if you want to reach it, like if you're a B2B tech company and you might need some positioning help, you could reach out to me, I guess. The book's a good place to start. You can buy that anywhere books are sold, including audiobooks. You could listen to me for 3.5 hours, talk in your ear. My website's aprildunford.com, and I don't really do much on social except Twitter, where I'm at April Dunford and occasionally tweet cat videos and things. So yeah, you can follow me there.
Are you on Clubhouse yet?
I'm really working at avoiding Clubhouse. I feel I'm going to get dragged in there eventually, but for now, no.
No Clubhouse, and you haven't accepted my LinkedIn request, so she's not on LinkedIn very often.
I'm on LinkedIn, but I get thousands of requests a day, and every once in a while, like about once a month, I'll go in there and accept them all. So I'll get to you.
Sweet, I'll look forward to it. So everyone, check out Obviously Awesome, April Dunford. This is more fun than I was anticipating, so I knew it was going to be fun to begin with. So I've had a blast. Thanks so much for this. So get after it. Don't just take this knowledge, do something with it. Knowledge for knowledge sake is pointless. Let's get after it and make things happen. Thanks, everyone. See ya.